With one of the best savings rates in America, banking with Capital One is the easiest decision in the history of decisions. Even easier than choosing Slash to be in your band.
Next up for lead guitar. You're in.
Cool.
Yep, even easier than that. And with no fees or minimums on checking and savings accounts, is it even a decision? That's banking reimagined. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com/bank for details. Capital One N.A. member FDIC.
This is Things Police See, First-Hand Accounts, with your host, Steve Gould.
Welcome to the podcast that interviews active and retired police officers about their most intense, bizarre, and sometimes humorous moments on the job. I am your host, Steve Gould. Welcome to the show. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for checking us out. If it's your first time, thank you for coming back. If you're a longtime fan, love you guys. Love the all the ratings and reviewings I'm getting on Apple Podcasts. 5-star review would be very grateful for that. I want to get to 1,000. We're at high 8s. I think we're almost at 900. We're very close. Only a couple away from 900. So if you guys could do that, I would truly appreciate it. Or if you only listen on Spotify, I'll take them there too. But Apple Podcasts is by far the largest purveyor of podcasts. So that would be greatly appreciated. Also, if you really, really love the show and you want to show me, you can go to Patreon. It's in the links in the show notes. You can go there. You can be a patrolman. You can be a sergeant. You get a couple different things with over here, a couple of different things with your membership and direct access to me and all that stuff. So if you really love the show, you can go there. If you can't afford it or it's not in the budget, don't worry about it. This show is going to remain free. The point is to get the stories out of the men and women of law enforcement so that we can get a better appreciation for what they do every day. Today's guest is a SoCal copper. At least he started as a SoCal cop. He got his start in a few different police departments in Southern California. He worked for the LA DA's office, then as a special agent for the California Department of Justice. He was a member of the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force, then became the commander. After his police career, he was then deployed overseas as an embedded counter-terrorism, organized crime subject matter expert. So clearly his police career was not enough. He had to go for more. And then he is also the author of Outside the Wire, a very popular and highly rated book. So we're going to talk about all those things. Most importantly, we're going to get his war stories. So without further ado, let me bring on Gary Edgington. Gary!
Hello. Hey, how are you?
Good. Thank you for coming on the show, brother.
My pleasure. I assure you. My pleasure.
So SoCal, you'd think being a SoCal cop would be enough action. But you started, which agencies did you work for there?
I started out as a boot with the Manhattan Beach Police Department. And then I lateraled to Beverly Hills Police Department and did a few years in the Detective Bureau there and got bitten by the investigator bug and moved over to the DA's office and landed finally I worked major narcotics and all kinds of stuff at the DA's office, and then ended up at the California Department of Justice where I finished my law enforcement career.
That's awesome. There's so many paths you can take if you're in law enforcement in Southern California. I was there in the, as a background investigator for LAPD civilian in their background unit. And even after that career, I became a fraud investigator for a private insurance company. And there's insurance cops. There's a whole branch of insurance cops in and
Department of Insurance.
Yeah, badges, guns. The starting rank is detective. And they were looking. I went to a meeting there because they'd have meetings with us, and they saw I was a younger guy, and they're like, why isn't this guy a cop anymore? What, and they had an opening, and they're like, hey, we could look into it. We'll look at your academy from Massachusetts. We might be able to transfer you in. But the problem with that job, it's based out of Fresno. Oh, terrible.
Oh, well, they have them in LA too.
Yeah, maybe they didn't have an opening in LA, but I think the Fresno office is probably hurting a lot because it's horrible.
Oh, Fresno.
I fueled up my company car there. I was afraid for my life. There was people scurrying around the car looking at me. I'm like, I got to get out of here.
I did a huge IA case in Fresno. I'm very familiar with Fresno.
I couldn't.
And that long drive up I-5 to get there.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
I lived in the high desert. beautiful little spot right at the base of the mountains at the top of the Cajun Pass. So I would just shoot across the Mojave Desert. I actually thought it was awesome, the big, huge Air Force base out there. And you're just cooking across the desert. I get into Bakersfield and then up to Fresno that way. But those two, Visalia was nice. I used to try to stay in Visalia. But Fresno and Bakersfield, I definitely, because we'd have to rap on doors, try to interview. Yeah. People would straight up come out cussing me out. Gangsters.
Oh, yeah.
And, they just see
surprised.
the white guy with the briefcase and business cards, and they're like, get that out of here, MFer.
Yeah, exactly.
I told my boss, I'm like, listen, this guy tried to jack me up today. Like I went on one, I was interviewing the guy, and when I came out, my rear tire had 2 punctures in it. And he was a gangster involved in tuning up his daughter's car for money. And he goes, hey, man, just pull it into the garage here. We'll take care of you. I'm like, I took off on a flat tire, and he's like, come back. I'm like, I'm not going into a closed garage with you guys. The interview was terrible. He was breaking up a cup of ice with a knife, like a K-bar, while we were talking. And I get to the gas station. I fill up. I get some Fix-A-Flat. I make it to my hotel, and I look at my tire, and sure enough, it's not the tread. There's 2 holes, like sliced like from a knife in the sidewall. I'm like, so sure enough, I must have been talking to the guy while I'm interviewing him. He must have sent a buddy out. And then I don't know if it was going to be, this will look good because we'll help him. We'll patch his tire and this will get some credit for us, or we're going to make him disappear.
Yeah, got to make him disappear. Yeah, it would not have ended well. I'm certain of that. You would have been a 2020 story.
Gives me chills thinking about it, man, because you just feel when you're not in law enforcement anymore and you're doing investigations like that, it's a lot of ex-cops doing it, and a lot of us carry, although the company doesn't really want that. There's no way you're not. But then if you get into it, you're not a cop, so you got to carry insurance for that. And
yep,
it just was.
I do. Yeah, for sure.
Dancing a line, brother. So, Gary, you clearly have a really interesting and big resume. I wondered, former guest Chris Strom was a NYPD intelligence officer who went overseas and worked counter-terrorism in the Middle East as well. I saw your resume and I thought, I wonder if he knows Chris Strom. He wrote a really great book.
No, I don't. I did work with a couple of detectives from NYPD Intelligence Division.
Yep, that's what he was.
But I went to their headquarters one time and stuff like that. But no, I don't know that name off the top of my head. But he may have worked for the same company I went over there for.
Okay. Yeah, I thought that was interviewing him was my first kind of delve into that. I know big law enforcement agencies have people embedded places. Like New York was sending people to get embedded in mosques after 9/11 overseas, which was like, wow.
LAPD as well. Yeah.
You think I thought that was reserved to special agents for federal agencies, but no, they're
right.
Whatever you guys obviously have a level of knowledge and training that's just as good or better for those scenarios. Clearly, if they're picking you guys to go.
Well, I had retired from DOJ, and this was a job that I applied for and was selected for as a retired guy. But those agencies do deploy people forward overseas and into D.C. and other places as they should, because, God bless the federal agencies themselves and the many friends I have over there and stuff, but there is a problem with the flow of communication, and ultimately the people of the city of Los Angeles are dependent upon their protection from the police department and the sheriff's department, and they expect that, and the Los Angeles Police Department tries to do everything they can to afford them that by and one of those things is trying to have people on the ground who can report that information straight back to cleared persons within the police department who are authorized to have that information to make decisions. And that's why they do it. And I think it makes a lot of sense. You can't rely on the largesse of a federal agency for all your information. if you're going to stay ahead of the curve.
It makes sense. If you're a population center in this country, in LA,
Right.
New York, Chicago, that's where all the people are. I mean, that's where a ton of the people are. It makes sense that officers would be embedded over there. Gary, that's a tangent I'd love to go down, but we'll push it till later because I want to ask.
Okay.
I want to ask about a young Gary Edgington, and who I'm talking about here is this guy. Maybe this guy. Was this your first time? I'm showing pictures of Gary.
No,
from his
that's
website.
Beverly Hills.
That's Beverly
That was
Hills.
my first day at Beverly Hills, which is the day that I saw the taser being deployed. But I am in the academy, and I think I'm about to go on a. That was taken at my girlfriend's house at the time. That picture of me standing there in the tan and green.
Oh, okay.
I'm sure I was in the academy then, and I'm sure I was about to go out and work a shift at Manhattan Beach Police Department.
And is that a canine or you just German Shepherd pet?
That was their dog. Neither of those dogs were police canines. The other one was a Dobie female that we had at the time.
You got to see the picture
So-
if you're on the podcast. It's all in the audio, but they're going up on YouTube now about a week after the podcast airs. But Gary's here. He's very young man. He's got the speed loaders, the revolver.
Oh, yeah.
There's actually room on his gun belt. There's like, what is this big
yeah.
space? Shouldn't he be jamming that with heavy stuff?
I have my 6-inch Model 66 and 2 speed loaders and my PR-24 and 1 pair of handcuffs.
It's great, man. I love it.
Yeah.
So, what's your first hot call from one of those jobs you can remember? The first call that you were like, woo, this is intense.
Well, I'll tell you, it occurred to me probably the scariest thing that happened when I was a brand new baby face was got a call of a 50, what we call a 5150, which is basically somebody who's whacked out of their mind, armed with a knife, terrorizing his family. And I was in training with my FTO, with my field training officer. And as you read from my bio, my father was killed in the line of duty while I was in the 3rd week of the academy by a 5150 armed with a knife.
Wow. So
this is like something that is, pretty close to home. So I will never forget. And I was pretty frightened because this guy was really, really whacked out of his mind. Young male standing in front of the house on the porch, naked, with a big damn butcher knife in his hand, screaming at the top of his lungs and terrorizing his family. And we were afraid he was going to kill his family. And I'll never forget my FTO looking at me and saying, "Gary, this is before all that fancy crap, tasers or any of that stuff." He says, "Gary," he says, "I have my Streamlight, my flashlight, big aluminum flashlight. Mm-hmm. I have my PR-24." And he says, "If he comes past me," he says, you got to shoot him." And I'm sitting there. I can still visualize looking down at my 45 in my hand, and I'm going, this shit just got real, big time. This was like, wow.
Especially with what happened to your father. What an ominous call to get early on.
Yeah, exactly. And the interesting thing about that was, the wonderful part of that was that we were able to talk him down and get him in custody. And, he was, he must have been, some sort of split personality or something or whatever. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But he was so apologetic to his family afterwards. His mother was crying. His father was crying. And you asked me about heartwarming. That was heartwarming also because I was so grateful that we didn't have to kill him and that the situation ended the way it did, and the parents, the family were so grateful that we didn't have to do it, and I know we were. Yeah. It was just, but the interesting thing, as I started to say, was I actually had 2 calls involving whack attacks armed with knives while I was in training. In that 3-month training cycle when I graduated from the academy, I don't know if God or somebody was testing me, Because that didn't happen very often. Not in Manhattan Beach. It did not happen very often. And here I am faced, fresh out of the academy, just a few months after my father is killed by a crazy guy. I'm facing two crazy individuals armed with knives. And in both instances, they resolved peacefully. And certainly, like I said, the one with the boy, I remember so clearly because I remember how dramatic it was when he was finally calmed down and taken into custody. His parents were crying, and we were just so grateful that we didn't have to take his life. I was like, it was just really pretty scary. And I can still look, I close my eyes right now. I can still see that pistol in my hand. Right. We were like 10 feet away from the guy up against a hedge. And that was like pretty real.
Oh my
pretty
gosh.
real.
That is intense, man. How do you guys, we call them a section 12 in Massachusetts, same thing, 5150, section 12. How would you guys, I'm just curious about the procedure of it. Would you secure them, obviously. Then would you guys bring them, or would you have an ambulance come and then you follow the ambulance or go in the back of the ambulance with them?
No, we would take them to a county mental hospital. Well, let me back up and say county hospital that had a medical ward there, or a mental ward. As I recall, there were two in LA County we would use. One was up in the San Fernando Valley, Olive View, and the other one was down in Harbor area, Long Beach area down there. It was a county hospital down there. And for Manhattan Beach, we would always take them down to the one in the Harbor area if we could, if they had availability. Sometimes they wouldn't have availability and we'd have to haul them all the way up to the valley.
So would you obviously transfer custody to them. Would you get a warrant for when he was released, or would you just do we call a crim app? Like you would charge him, but he would be released to the custody of the hospital and then later be charged if you're going to charge him.
Actually, there were no criminal charges in either case, and they rarely are there. Both these individuals were so obviously mentally disturbed that there was no way to and there was no, obviously terrorizing your parents and threatening death and all that stuff is a crime. It's a felony and all that, but nobody was charged in that instance. In California, under Welfare and Institutions Code 5150, and this is a long time ago, they had a 72-hour commitment. You'd take him to the hospital. The doctor would evaluate him, sit down and meet with him and say, yeah, he's crazy or no, he's not. And if he's not crazy, then you got to figure out what you're going to do with him. And that meant usually bringing him back and booking him if you could. But if not, then they stayed there and you're done. Off you go.
Yeah, no charges. That's the way to go, man.
Exactly, and if you're going, and if you're doing the one in Olive View, you always stopped at Tommy's for a Tommy's burger on the way back.
That's so funny you say that, because I have an interview coming out with my old backgrounds manager, who was a Maywood cop. That Maywood got kind of collapsed up into the sheriff's department, but he was a sergeant there on James Williams. And we were going home one night after. I'm going to tell the story twice now because it's on the other thing. But we were going home, and he said, "Have you ever been to Tommy's?" I said, "What's that?" And he said, "We gotta go," because we'd been at work, then the brewery next door, and then he was driving me home, and we got these gigantic sloppy. I ruined my shirt. It was
oh god, yeah, oh yeah,
so good.
Yeah, chili. It's a chili. Whatever they call it, it's chili. They say it's chili. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but they say it's chili.
Yeah. I'd had a few beers, so whatever it was, it went down easy.
It didn't really matter.
No,
it didn't really matter.
Went down easy. And about 4 a.m., I sat up and was like, "Ooh."
Yeah. You better follow it up with some kind of antacid, or you're going to be paying for sure. Absolutely,
man. Yeah. I'm glad I experienced it though, because now I have a common bond with you SoCal guys.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Gary, can you describe the strangest or most bizarre thing you dealt with in any of your careers? I know you probably have a bunch, so.
Okay. There are a few, but the one that pops to mind immediately was I got a call. I just dropped off my partner, and I was working graveyard shift, and I just dropped off my partner at the station. He was going to write a report. So I was in an L car. I was now an L car. I was a single man car. And I got a call of an assault victim in the north end of Beverly Hills. So I'm like, okay, this could be interesting. So I pull up, black out, do all the tactical things you're supposed to do. I get out of the car and I start walking up the driveway or walking up the sidewalk, kind of creeping around. And this guy sees me and he says, hurry, come quick. Paul Lynde's been assaulted. I think he's dead.
Ooh.
Now, Paul Lynde is a famous comedian from Hollywood Squares, Bewitched, a million different shows, right? So I'm thinking immediately, like, this is Hollywood. Everything's just a tiny bit weirder here.
Yes.
So this is going to be an awful Manson murders, overkill, blood everywhere, bloody fingerprints, all kinds of crap, right? So I'm like, oh, shit. So I, pop my gun out and I've got it in my hand and I walk in and I am immediately transported to something akin to the Twilight Zone. I walk into this house and it was so strange. It was just like so weird. There was this huge, biggest standard poodle I've ever seen in my life walking around, black standard poodle walking around, a massive guy that probably had arms as big as my thighs, sitting over in the corner just crying his eyes out. And then this guy takes me into the bedroom, and there in the bed, in a white canopy bed, is Paul Lynde. And why he thought Paul had been assaulted was Paul had been dead for a while and had basically postmortem lividity, which of course is the blood settled and it looks like bruising to somebody who doesn't really know.
Sure.
It looks like bruising. He also was in an agonal position, and his arms were drawn up and he looked like, it was typical what you would see in something like that. And there was a drug that was commonly used to accentuate sexual activity.
Amyl nitrate or something?
Yeah, exactly. Something like that on the nightstand next to him.
Yeah.
And so what happened was these guys Paul had failed to show up for his birthday party the day before. So they went to, or maybe it was that night. I don't remember now. It's been a long time. But they ended up breaking in to the house and they discovered Paul in that situation. He had died of a massive heart attack. And but it was a it was one of those things that was so strange when I walked in there, I was like, God, what is going on here? This is so weird. And it just kept getting weirder and weirder. My sergeant came out, a detective sergeant came out, and he looked around and he looked at the stuff on the nightstand. I didn't know what that stuff was. Yeah. I was such a baby face. And he told me what it was. I was like, oh God. Yeah. So it was a little tiny bit weird.
That's a weird one, man. Yeah, similar to you. I ran across a guy that had a OUI arrest, but he had a bag full of tricks in his trunk, dildos, and all this weird sex stuff, ball gags. Then he had these drugs, and I didn't know what they were. But he's like, "They're poppers. They're poppers." I'm like, "What would you call a popper?" Because I'm looking for the class of drug. I'm like, "What do I charge this guy?" So I called. I worked on Cape Cod at the time, and Provincetown was a few towns away. Huge gay community up there, lots of partying. So I called their sergeant and I go, "What is a popper?" And he goes, "Amyl nitrate." It's, he's like, it's class D or class M, whatever it was. He told me what to charge and what it was. But yeah, same thing. How would I know? I don't run into these
exactly.
type of things.
And it was called on the street in LA. It was called locker room. So draw your own conclusions from that.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
That is a weird one. So when you guys, I'm assuming it's the same as us. When you have a unintended body like that, you hang out for a homicide and then like the medical examiner, coroner, or something like that.
Exactly. The rules are if no physician is able to sign a death certificate, then with some kind of attributable cause of death, then the coroner is the one who takes custody of the body.
Yeah, man, I am not cool with that. I work in like a very small place too, and it's like there's always the chance you're gonna have to help put the person in the bag, and it's like when like you said, when they have rigor and then they go to straighten them, it is like bone chilling to me.
Oh, creepy!
I just don't like it when they straighten bodies out to put them in the bag.
God.
I mean, I had one guy that was on the toilet, older guy, and he was completely upright, holding onto his walker like this, frozen.
Not the way you want to go.
No. And, he had like family over, like 7 people sleeping over for the holidays. And
God.
I was asking the medical examiner, I'm like, how? What? And he had some, he's like, well, what happens is, or he had a massive heart attack, whatever. The blood went here and he spasmed, then froze. And there was a reason. But, they got to get him out of that position and put him in the bag. And it's like, that's one thing. Like, I think everybody has their weakness. But for me, that turns my stomach. I just don't like seeing the human body like manipulated like that. I
remember the first time I had to go to the coroner's office. I was a cadet at Culver City, and we'd had a homicide, and they needed me to go to the coroner's office to pick up some evidence, and I'd never been there before. In the academy, you go to the coroner's office, and they delight in taking you around and showing you every gory thing there possibly is. And a similar thing happened to me that day, because this guy is looking at me, and he's like, this is a baby face, right? So he takes me in the elevator down to the basement where everything happens, and as soon as the door opens, the smell hits you. And I know he watched the blood leave my face, and he took me the long way around to find the evidence. And it's a smell you don't forget. It's not a pleasant smell. It's awful. And I've only been there a few times, and one time was to look at some evidence on a really creepy unsolved homicide that I worked on for a while when I was with the Department of Justice. We called it the cock in the jar case.
Oh,
it
really?
Involved the castration of the male victim. Yes.
Really? What was the backstory with that?
Well, the backstory was that a local agency was contacted by a young man who said pointed to this guy who he'd lived with for a while and said, this guy, I'm underage, and this guy had sex with me multiple times, picked me up on the street out of state, and we drove around all over the country, and he had sex with me, brought me back to his house and had sex there. Oof. And so they execute a warrant on him. And he meets the detectives at the front door, and he says, yeah, what you're looking for is in that file cabinet. And they're like, okay. So they go to the file cabinet, and it ain't what they're looking for. It's one of those big jars.
Ain't nobody looking for that.
No, nobody's. And let me tell you something. It's a scary thing to look at, too. Trust me. Anyway, it's in one of those big jars that people, usually wives, have all of their like pasta or olive oil and all this stuff, those big heavy glass jars. And it was in that. And it was in alcohol in that jar. And of course, that's not what they were looking for, but it certainly opened up a whole can of worms. And they worked it for a while. Then they gave it to the Department of Justice, and another investigator worked on it for a while. And then I picked it up and thought it would be kind of interesting to play with for a while. And so I did some investigation on it, and I went to
so the guy who answered the door, Gary, was that the kid he'd been abusing?
That was the suspect in the child molestation case.
Oh, I was thinking it was the kid he had abused, and the kid took out revenge.
No. It was the suspect in the child molestation case, who then became a suspect in a murder investigation, but unfortunately we were never able to find the actual victim because there were a couple things that happened. First one was the pathologist, when he did an examination on the specimen, he took it out of the alcohol and put it in formalin, and then when he was done, he put it back in the alcohol, which killed, according to the lab people that we had at the Department of Justice, it pretty much ruined the DNA. So we really couldn't. We had two possible candidates that we had found through VICAP, through FBI. One was in Pennsylvania, and the other one was in Utah. I think it was Utah. Anyway, both victims were rural body dumps. Both victims had been posed in a specific way, and both had a similar wound pattern.
And he was cutting their wieners off? Was it like a trophy for him?
The whole package, yeah. It's laterally across the pubic bone, and then basically like a triangle back to the anus, and it's removed. I told you it's bad. It's really bad. So both those victims were killed with the same weapon. Both victims were killed with the same weapon. But I did some research and discovered that the jar was from England. So I was on a trip over there to London, and so I contacted the National Police College in London and talked to their criminal profiling unit and said, "Hey, have you had anything like that?" And they said, "No." That's really creepy.
Don't call us again.
He said he was laughing. He said, "That's really weird. We've never had anything like that, but you should call the Germans." So I called the Germans. And the Germans said, "No, that's so creepy. Call the Dutch." So I called the Dutch.
That's awesome.
And I talked to this guy. I talked to this detective, and he said, we're very proud of our very liberal, policies in Holland, as far as sexuality and all that stuff. But he said, even that's too creepy for us.
Wow. Only in America, baby.
Okay. Yeah, so that case is, as far as I know, that case is still unsolved. We found some other evidence later on. Another person took it over after I got promoted and moved into internal affairs. But it was really a fascinating case. I'll tell you another funny story about that. So I went to West Hollywood because part of this case centered around West Hollywood because the suspect in the case, whose house this was found in, wrote fantasies.
Okay.
Gothic fantasies about castration. So I went to a bookstore in West Hollywood on Santa Monica Boulevard that's no longer there and identified myself, told them I was investigating a homicide, and do you have any books on castration? Now, you would normally think that they probably wouldn't, but guess what? They did, and they were sold out.
Ugh.
Okay?
That's a lot of leads, Gary.
Oh my God!
I need you to start taking ID when you sell these books.
Yeah, exactly. Can you imagine? They're sold out. It was as if I had just asked for the latest Martha Stewart cookbook. He says, "Oh, sure." Took me right over where the spot where it would be, and he says, "I guess we're sold out." And I'm like, "Holy shit!"
Man. Hollywood is such a weird place.
So there you go. I guess I gave you a couple of weird stories there.
Yeah, those are fantastic. People are going to love those, and they're going to be very cringy.
Yeah,
that reminds me of one of the early on in the podcast I interviewed a guy who was a West Hollywood deputy sheriff stationed there, and some of his stuff was just, he walked by an alley and caught a guy fisting another guy while the guy was passed out, and then he kind of gets himself free and runs over to him, and he's like, "Oh hell no, do not touch me."
Yeah, I was once again a baby cadet at Culver City. I mean, as naive as could be, and they did a search warrant on a print shop that printed those magazines, and for this, it was called the Crisco Kid, believe it or not.
Oh, boy.
And I saw these magazines, and I was like, oh, my God. I was so shocked and appalled. And I was like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
This is just, huh?
The depravity. It's like, oh my
yeah.
gosh.
I mean, I can't even imagine. It just defies any kind of rationale that I can conceive of.
Yeah.
So there you go. Yeah.
My goodness. Jeez, I think I've.
And I never worked Vice. I never ever worked Vice. With all these stories I have, I've never worked Vice.
Man, that's just you're just gonna get that just being a beat cop. That you're just gonna get it.
Yeah.
Man, those are good, Gary. Those are really good.
Good. I'm glad.
Can you tell us about a time, or maybe the most intense moment you had on the job, most terrifying moment?
Certainly that one story I told you about when I was a rookie. There was another incident in Manhattan Beach. I was riding with my FTO, as a matter of fact, and we went in pursuit of a vehicle for a vehicle code violation, traffic, and the guy accelerated to ungodly speeds down what the hell street was that called? Anyway, it doesn't matter. But anyway, Marine. No, it wasn't Marine. Anyway, going down this street, and he gets to a street that follows the ocean, and he makes a right. And as he makes a right, all this stuff starts flying out the windows, and it's bags of cocaine. Okay. And he is going like a bat out of hell, and we're going like a bat out of hell, and we're going through some curves, and it's called the S curves there. It's near a power station, and it's either in El Porto or El Segundo. Anyway, he gets into the S curves, and he loses control of the vehicle and spins around, flips, smacks up against a fence. It's very dramatic, bursts into flames, and I'm like, oh my God. It was crazy. And I jumped out of the car, and my FTO jumped out of the car, and he ran over and was able to drag the guy out of the car as it was burning. And I was like, wow, that was crazy. I actually, there was that was another incident I had. It was also at Manhattan Beach, which was scary. I was now off of training and minding my own business, driving down Pacific Coast Highway at probably 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm driving along northbound. I'm at just before Marine, and it's a hill, and I see this guy in front of me kind of walking across the street way ahead of me, probably 70, 80 yards ahead of me. Crossing the street in front of me, and then all of a sudden I hear this smack, and I see this thing fly through the air. It looked like a sack of rags, looked like a duffel bag flying through the air, and he crashes into the center divider, and his body is wrapped around a sprinkler head, one of those tall sprinkler heads. It's literally wrapped around the sprinkler head, and I get on the radio. And I scream, injury TA, roll paramedics, blah, 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 blah. And all the guys that were out there working thought I had hit the guy because I was so, excited, because I just seen a guy practically get killed right in front of my eyes. And so they're rolling code 3 there, thinking that I was the one who hit the guy. And no, it turned out to be a DUI driver and all of this stuff. But it was crazy. It was like, wow,
That's nuts.
I swear it's the drunkest human beings I've ever met in my life were in Manhattan Beach.
Oh, I believe it.
I don't think they allow you in that town unless you're capable of blowing like a 1.5 or a 2.0. I mean,
those highways running along the coast, PCH.
Yeah,
those are because when we lived there, we went to those beaches a few times, a couple different places because that goes way up, and you got to cross it. The cars go so fast, and you literally have people in bikinis and bathing suits in boogie boards, bare feet, running across that highway when people are going 70. And I was talking to a cop up there, and he's like, oh, yeah. He's like, we've had people just cut in half. Just in their bikinis, like the top of the woman's here, the bottom's over here. He goes, it's like, it's so frigging dangerous, that area, for pedestrians.
Yeah, I know it. Yeah, I absolutely. And I can think of several spots that are like that where people do that, and I'm sure that that's the case because people aren't paying attention. Maybe they're looking at the girls walking by. Maybe they're drunk or whatever, and smack, somebody gets whacked. That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, it's such a weird thing. I came from the East Coast, grew up on Cape Cod, where the beaches are just pristine, but they're always being eroded. They're always getting smaller, or sandbars are being formed, or there's breakthroughs from the inlet. And they're just always they're in battle with Mother Nature. In California, it's like that doesn't happen. So you were able to build a city on the beach, which there are several. And so it's such a weird scene when you go there, that it's like the beach is so beautiful, and they can groom it and it never goes away. It's just always the same beach. But all the shop that then, like, so close to that are legitimate cities with like legit big city problems. Like when we would go to Santa Monica, we would just want to go like get the kids a smoothie or get a coffee at Starbucks, and there would always be a crazy person there shouting, or the police were chasing somebody down, or they were being filmed. And the people filming them were screaming that they were racist. It was like, it's just though the beach is supposed to be relaxing. But right across the highway, people are living their lives, raising hell. It's so weird for me as a Cape Codder. It's a weird thing to experience.
Well, it is. We used to. Beverly Hills used to seem to attract a lot of crazies and a lot of transients, and the beach does as well. It's like they're walking west and they reach the ocean and they can't go any further, so that's where they stay.
You guys don't have that natural culling effect that we have. It gets to zero here. So these people are.
That's true.
They're not living on the beach. They're just dying. So in California,
exactly.
In California, you see 80-year-old homeless people, and you're like, you'd never make it. In Boston, you would be dead because the shelter would close, and you were drunk, and then you would just die in the street and freeze to death. Yeah.
There is the natural selection in Southern California rarely has anything that is rarely dependent upon the weather. That's for sure. Although of late, they've had a lot of unseasonably cold and wet weather, but usually, no, people can live on the street forever out there.
Is part of that part of it with the crazy people has got to be that people go there to, quote, make it in whatever art form they're in, acting, comedy, graphic design, whatever it is. They want to be part of the big show. They inevitably don't make it. They hit the party scene, and then now they're 45 and they're just crazy. They're walking around with no pants on. It seems like there's a lot of that going on.
I'm not sure exactly what the progression is, but that sounds probably right. I think that's probably true. I think some people come out there, with visions of grandeur and vision themselves walking up on the stage and collecting the Oscar or the Grammy or whatever, and it doesn't happen. And, they resort to drugs and alcohol, and it just spirals out of control. And before they know it, their lives are ruined. I think that's probably a very common thing. Or they resort to crime.
Yeah. We had regulars when I was a guard at Harry Winston for extra money. There was regular crazy people in Beverly Hills that would, weekly would come in, and, everybody in the boutique would roll their eyes like, oh, because Harry Winston is it's like walking into Downton Abbey. Like, it's like every customer that comes in gets attention. They get catered to. It doesn't matter who they are. Even these people that, are just crazy and they're not going to buy anything. The employees would cater to them, get them a water, a soda. Oh, let me take out that, $4 million watch for the 200th time. You're not going to buy it. You're crazy. You took a bus
and
to get here.
You smell bad.
Yeah. And you smell terrible and you look nuts. And to me, it was like it gave me a little bit of pleasure because the people who work in those boutiques, and I don't want to pigeonhole them, but they are very judgmental, let's say, because I would hear all the conversations when someone would leave, and they're elitist themselves. They are,
of course.
I mean, because they're making $250,000 selling this stuff a year as a salesperson. And to see them have to deal with that, having been a cop, it was just kind of refreshing. Like, yeah, this is the real world, okay? Because people would come in, like a nice couple would come in, and they'd be like, you know, the engagement rings start at $950,000. Not because they're great diamonds, but it's because it's Harry Winston. That's why.
Right.
And, you know, people would come in and just be like, oh, honey, I'm really sorry. Or you could tell the dude was like, he made money, but like not that kind of money. And they would just trash them. What a cheap piece of crap. You can't even buy your fiance. If you can't buy her that ring, you don't even deserve her. It was like, that's the price of a house in this neighborhood. Like, that's insanity. But yeah, it was nice. It was a little just desserts, you know, to see Sally, the bag lady, come in and throw her stuff everywhere and demand a water. It was like, yeah, do your thing. That's your potential sale right there.
We definitely had some transos. We used to call them transos that were just fixtures, you know, in the area.
Yeah, why not go in Harry Winston, get a water and a cookie, go to Gucci, get something else. Hey, I got my snack. I'm full. Yeah, it was funny to watch. But
now with DoorDash, you can get your Starbucks go-tos delivered right to you. Early morning meeting? Treat yourself to a breakfast sandwich. Scored the winning point? Celebrate with a cold brew. Feeling exceptionally awesome? Keep doing you. Your usual is on the way. Coffee delivery makes every moment worth celebrating. So come on, make your day. Starbucks delivery now available on DoorDash. Tap the banner to order now. Menu limited. See the DoorDash app for details.
Gary, you're going to have to dig deep. A lot of cops have to dig deep for this. But can you tell me a heartwarming encounter? If you don't have one, I understand. But
let me think here.
Getting the kitten out of the tree or something?
We had... No. Heartwarming. Well, I would say actually it was more sad than heartwarming. We did a search warrant on it was a meth case, and there were kids there, and I mean, it was really sad. It was just sad. I mean, the fact that you know the mother was absent and the father was cooking this stuff and they had to live in it was pretty bad. But when the people came to take them, and you know, they were so sweet and wonderful to them, and so reassuring, and so sensitive to their plight, that it was reaffirming that there is decency and humanity in the world. Yeah. And there are people who are selfless, who care, and who are put themselves out to do that. And I would say there haven't been many things like that. I have to say, not a lot of heartwarming things. Most of it's not so great, but I was very touched by that. Yeah. So that sticks in my mind. It was such a disgusting, foul place too. It was unbelievable. You wouldn't keep your worst dog in that place. I mean, it was so disgusting. Ugh, and they were living in it, and it was just so pathetic.
It's one thing if you do it to yourself and you're an adult, but when you got these innocent lives in there, it's like so brutal.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, hey, that's on par with everybody else's heartwarming stories. So don't worry.
There's like a dark side to all the heartwarming stories. You know, the cops don't really pull the kitties out of the trees. We don't. We let the firemen do that. Let them do that. You know, everybody likes the firemen.
Yeah, they're the good guy. I always say if I get to a medical first, I go, "Don't worry, the good guys are on their way." I have one. I can't remember who it was, but I remember the story. One guy interviewed, and he said the whole story was this kid's mom's head got blown off in front of him, and her head got all over him, and then he was raised by like an uncle or aunt, and then later he showed up at the police station to thank him and to let him know that his life was okay. And it was like kind of heartwarming, but pretty
Once again, there's a dark aspect to this.
Right. Mom's head blew off.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So it's kind of, unfortunately, in police work, it's kind of always like that.
Yeah, pretty much.
Gary, can you talk about? I'm interested to hear about how you parlay being you were the commander of the DOJ terrorism task force with the FBI. Is that all one?
Well, basically, we were a component of the Joint Terrorism Task Force, and I was embedded with the Joint Terrorism Task Force from 1999 to when I retired in 2008, and after 9/11, I stood up the task force in Los Angeles, and we had jurisdiction initially from the San Diego County line to Monterey, and then eventually we got another task force in Orange County. So that eased up things a little bit. But basically, I felt like the FBI is the one who has original jurisdiction in all terrorism cases, so we need to have people embedded with them and participating and being part of the process. And so that's what we did. We embedded special agents and intelligence analysts with the Joint Terrorism Task Forces. And then eventually, as time moved on and memories got weaker, when the Department of Justice started to draw down the task forces, they made me the task force commander for all of our individuals who were assigned to the 8 JTTFs in California, from San Francisco, Sacramento, Fresno, Riverside, LA, all of it. So I supervised all of those people.
Where would you have agents? Like, where would you put them? Like, how were like field agents distributed?
They were assigned in LA. They were assigned. Well, initially we had them in the Orange County Joint Terrorism Task Force and in the Los Angeles Joint Terrorism Task Force, and then Orange County spun off and became its own task force, and so they had their people embedded with that. And initially, it was myself and one other agent, and then I got an analyst in there, and I got a couple more agents in there. And basically, we had a desk. We sat at a desk along with the FBI agents and all the other task force members, because you had people there from LAPD, LA Sheriffs, you name the agency, and they were there.
Who was feeding the investigations? Like, were you, like in a typical department, it would be patrol was kind of feeding investigations. What was it? Were you getting it from local guys mostly, or was it leads from the FBI?
Well, actually, it worked a couple of different ways. There were cases that we were assigned by the FBI to work, or they spun off and gave them to us because they couldn't really work them. And what we would do, our mission was to build a target package on the suspects, and then hand it off to a enforcement agency. We did a lot of work with the Los Angeles Police Department, counter-terrorism section at Major Crimes Division, and their criminal guys, and we gave them a lot of cases, and we did we spun them off to other agencies. And so basically we developed target packages. Some of that stuff we developed on our own through our own informants. Some of it were citizen call-ins, and some of it was from other agencies, other law enforcement agencies. One of the things that I did was go around and speak to other agencies and tell them, if you see something, because a local law enforcement, they're really like the first line of reporting. Sure. On intelligence, and also they're individuals, they could unwittingly come in contact with somebody, a terrorist, or somebody who's associated with more likely it's going to be somebody who's an associate or a supporter, or providing some kind of assistance than an actual bomb-throwing terrorist. Although that did happen a few times.
What terrorist group kept you the busiest?
I would say that we did a lot of stuff involving initially it had to do with Hamas. because there were some funding nodes, Islamic charities in California that were actually sending money to Hamas.
Oh, wow.
So there was that initially, and then we had a lot of stuff involving Lebanese Hezbollah and that kind of thing. And if you are working on Hezbollah, then you're also working, individuals associated with Iran, because Iran is basically calling the shots for Hezbollah or supporting Hezbollah.
That's wild. Now, you guys were also not just terrorism, but also intelligence, right? So did you deal with like Armenians at all?
No, not in that particular situation. Unless now there are Armenian terrorist groups. There were.
I'm saying that because like Glendale is that huge. They're notorious for like being absolutely like the mafia almost.
Well, there's a huge Armenian community in that Glendale area, and we didn't get involved in organized crime investigations. We would get involved in something if it had a nexus in some fashion or another to terrorism. If it's Armenian, it's not going to be Islamist terrorism. It's going to be related to either, again, something targeting Turkey, or because Armenians are Christians. Right. Or it's going to be something targeting, something in the Middle East, perhaps Iran or somebody else who has, abused the Armenian community. Gotcha.
Interesting. Yeah, Armenia is quite the place. I met a lot of great Armenian people when I was in L.A. And actually, our neighbors were Armenian. They introduced us a lot of cool food, a lot of cool like their coffee. Little coffees they have is kind of like espressos, delicious.
Baklava is like crack cocaine.
Yeah, it's good. She had this woman next door used to make it, and the husband showed me pictures of Armenian, just being like a naive guy that didn't. Mm-hmm. I don't ever go, let me Google Armenia and see what. It's incredible over there. There's a lot of technology. There's some really nice cities. Like, I think just being American, we get like thinking like it's so big here, we're all there is, or whatever. But
right.
When I think of Armenia, I don't think of like cities that look just like here. But really, it's like quite amazing over there. That's kind of a tangent, but
it's true. Very, very successful people, brilliant people, very hardworking, very shrewd businessmen, no question about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Gary, do you have any stories from overseas, any tight spots, any hairy situations you got into over there?
Yeah.
And were you armed over there, or were you kind of like
Yes, I was. Protected? Yes, I was.
Okay.
If you read my book, I have some rather choice things to say about the weapon I was carrying.
Okay.
Outside the wire, and basically there is an incident that is recounted in the book. I think the title of the chapter is called "Wrong Turns," and basically it's kind of a different version of a fictionalized version of what actually happened to me one time at night at Victory Base in Baghdad. I carried a M9 Beretta. I called it a paperweight, or in the book I call it the M9 annoying device.
Okay.
With 9mm ball ammo. A gun that's way too big for its purpose. I'm not a fan.
So you couldn't carry what you wanted then. They just gave you the gun.
That was why yes, exactly. So one time I had to go meet with one of the guys that worked for me at another base that's part of the Victory Base complex. It's a huge base that encompasses BIOP, which is Baghdad International Airport, Victory Base complex, Stryker, Liberty, like a bunch of different base camps. They're all camps. They call them camps. So I had to go over to Stryker, and I had dinner with this guy. I had lunch or dinner with this guy. And when I went over there, it was sunny. But when I came back, when I had to drive back, it was dark. And there are no street signs. And everything looked a lot different at night. So basically what happened was I started heading that direction back to, and I have a really good sense of direction. I can find my way around things pretty well. So I made my way back to a checkpoint. I remember going through that checkpoint on the other way. So I went through on the reverse side. And then I got in behind a convoy of a bunch of Humvees and MRAPs and stuff. And I'm following them, and then we go to another checkpoint, and it's all looking good. They make a right turn. I bumper lock them and make the right turn, and I'm in a white Ford Ranger, and I don't have my helmet or body armor or anything else. All I have is my empty M9. By the way, the guns are empty.
What?
I don't know if I hasten to tell you, yes.
They only give you bullets for like a mission, or?
Your gun is empty on base. You have to carry a couple of magazines, or at least one magazine with you. But the gun is empty and on safe in your holster. Yeah, that's really good. So anyway, I make a right turn behind the convoy, and I'm tooling down. I didn't realize this, but I was now off the base on the road that I think is called the Baghdad Airport Road. And the convoy pulls over to the right, and I drive past them, and I'm thinking, well, that's weird. Why did they do that? They picked a spot to pull over. That's kind of odd. And so I continue driving, and then I start seeing green tracers flying in the air. Happy fire, we called it. They called it happy fire over there. And I start seeing minarets, and there's these sound walls on both sides of the road.
What's a minaret, Jerry?
The things at the top of a tower. It's like an onion shaped dome at the top of a tower. Okay. That is a tower is where the clerics do the call to prayer, or the call to prayer is broadcast from that tower. Okay. And you see those in the Middle Eastern world all over the place, and you hear the call to prayer at certain hours of the day, throughout the day. And anyway. So I'm driving along, and I'm going, okay, this is really not looking terribly familiar to me. And then I realized that I have driven off the base, and I am in Indian country, as they say.
Oopsie pie.
With an empty gun, exactly, oopsie pie, with an empty gun and a middle finger. And that's about as much as I got, right? So there is this a 4-lane divided highway, and in the middle is this wide divider, and it's all that red, soft, really fine sand. So I drop her into first gear, jump the curb, go, praying to God that this thing's traction, and literally I get over the curb, and I'm now on the sand, and I'm going along, and it starts to bog down, and I'm like, come on, baby, come on, baby, come on, baby. And I coax it over to the other side and jump with the curb on the other side and get it over, and I'm back on the road. And now I'm like, okay, so now where the F do I go? Okay, how do I get back to the base? So I'm going along, and all of a sudden I see all these really bright lights at what looks like an off-ramp. So I'm thinking, okay, that has to be a checkpoint. And it was, thank God. And I will never forget the contractor standing there. One of them was a contractor from the Congo, and the other guy was a Belgian. And they were laughing their asses off when I told them what had happened. They thought that was the funniest thing in the world. I didn't think it was that funny. And when I finally got back to that my hooch there, my place where I stayed, I was like, oh my God, I need a drink. Of course, you can't get a drink anywhere around there, but I needed one badly. Because man, that could have ended very badly for me. Very badly.
Crap in my pants. I mean, on a much smaller scale, I did that down in San Diego. I almost drove into Mexico, and I'm armed and everything else, and I'm just following.
Also a problem.
Exactly. So I'm in these neighborhoods just outside Mexico for an investigation, and I almost drove into the checkpoint, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be screwed. I have a gun. Like, I don't know how understanding they're going to be. You know what I mean?
Not at all.
Yeah, I was like, I got to be careful, man, because there was parts in San Diego where I would drive and then you could see over, and the contrast is incredible. You'd see Mexico right there, and it just looked like shanty town, you know?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's kind of spooky. I mean, nothing like that, but I know the feeling of being like going somewhere you can't get away from or can't get out of. Oh, my gosh.
That would have been really bad. They would have taken your gun away from you, probably your car, and you would have been lucky if you walked away with your freedom.
Yeah, I was thinking all that. I was like having a panicked moment. I was like, what am I doing?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Gary, so I've had you over an hour. I appreciate your time, sir. I just have
sure, not at all.
One other question for you.
Having a great time.
Glad to hear it. So new people out there getting into law enforcement, do you have some sage advice for them after this big career you've had? What would you tell somebody who's thinking about it, either state, local, or federal?
Yeah. Okay. My usual advice to young people is try to go federal if possible. I think, unfortunately, I mean, to be very, very honest with you, I think uniformed policing is a very perilous thing to be in now. You can be the most moral, decent, upstanding individual that ever walked the earth and carried a badge and still find yourself in a world of hurt. Yeah. Just because you were assigned to respond to a scene and you get sucked into a maelstrom of bad things. And that doesn't even count the fact that people want to kill you and ambush you and all these things that are happening now too. I'm just talking about the legal aspects. But thank God there are still young people that want to do it. My advice is initially keep your ears open and your mouth shut. Actually, keep your mouth shut a lot in law enforcement, because that's one of the things that gets cops in trouble is their mouths. Yeah. And so, mind that. And also always, no matter what is going on around you, always do the right thing. And never cover for somebody else. Because you are going to end up as collateral damage, even though you are not a person that's a principal involved in it, whatever it is. And I mean, guys make mistakes. Guys sometimes do stupid stuff because they get caught in the moment for whatever reason. Don't be honest. Don't lie. Tell the truth. Those are things that I would recommend to anybody starting in the business, for sure.
Awesome. Good stuff, Gary. Thank you. Before we part ways here, talk to us about the book a little bit. I know it's really cool because it's a novel, right? It's not it's not a collection of war stories. It's an actual novel.
No, it is not. Although there are a couple war stories in there that are drawn from real life experiences. Actually, there's a chapter called Shots Fired, Officer Down that's kind of about what happened with my father and my experience there in a way. It's different. And like I said, right turns. And there are a few other things that happened to me in Iraq that are portrayed in the book. The book Outside the Wire is inspired by my experiences in my law enforcement career in the United States, as well as my experiences in Iraq as an embedded advisor with the Army's improvised explosive device defeat cell. And it is very fast-paced. It's been well received to the point where people have told me I need to write another one, so I actually am writing another one. I'm bringing back the same characters, or some of the same characters, those that survived.
Very cool.
Because a few don't. But I am writing a sequel that takes place a couple years later. And it is available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble online. It's in a couple of bookstores, but for the most part, the easiest way to find it is Barnes & Noble or Amazon online.
And I'll put a link right in the show notes, so if you're listening,
that'd be awesome.
You want to grab the book, you can just go to the show notes and click on it right there.
Yeah. You will have my undying gratitude.
That's a good thing to have.
Yeah, indeed, yes.
No, I'm sure people are gonna want to pick it up. It's not your career is fascinating, man, and
thank you very much. I appreciate it.
It's an honor to have you on. Thank you for giving me your time and sharing those stories with people.
My pleasure. A
link to the book will be in the show notes. Like I said, I'll put it on the website. And when you get the second one going, or when you need a little shout out or whatever, just let me know. You're a friend of the show now.
Roger that.
We'll get it out there, brother. And
I assure you I will, because this is the worst part of writing is this damn promotion crap.
I know.
Oh my God. And social media. I don't know anything about Instagram or any of that stuff. I'm having to learn. And it's just, God.
It's a big learning curve, man.
It is a huge learning curve, huge learning curve. But I have had such a great time speaking with you. It's brought back some fun memories, and I really appreciate it. I've really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you, Gary. Hey, I'm going to do the outro. Can you hang out for a couple seconds?
Absolutely.
All right, I'll be right with you, sir. Guys, the great Gary Edgington. Crazy stories, man. What a career. Holy cow. Go pick up his book. The link will be in the show notes. Of course, it is outside the wire. And guys, thank you for joining us for this interview. And I encourage you, if you like the interview and you like this sort of thing, go back to the back catalog. There's over 140 hours of interviews on here. Perfect for binging. If you do love it and you want to give me a little fist bump, Apple Podcast 5-star review. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. And besides that, you can go to Patreon and join up if you really, really love the show. And now it's that time in the show when I shout out the Patreon sergeants. Who I'm talking about is Lane Campbell, Gary Steiner, Adam Mihal, Chris June, Andy Biggs, William James Long, that's Deputy William James Long to you, Tony Fahey, Seth Wright, James Rose, John Shoemaker, Jake Painito, Brandon Hooker, Lauren Stimson, Jason Lau, Nathan Gowan, the great Mike Wynn, Corey Payne, Sasha McNabb, Braden Walker, Sean Clipper, the great Tammy Walsh, Scott Minkler, Ben Peters, Greg Gadboy, Motor Cop Chronicles Podcast, George Tessier, Just Dennis, the great Tom Connell, everybody, Nick Noose, Wayne M. Miller, Scott Young, Derek Warden, Burley Boards, that's Dan Carlson, everybody, Doug and Kelly Newman, the great Raymond Arsenal. Folks, thank you for your support. I truly appreciate it, and I love you guys, each and every one of you.
The Venture X card from Capital One gives you premium travel benefits, perfect for seeing Taylor Swift The Eras Tour. Presented by Capital One. Ooh, I do love her. Earn 5 times miles on flights and 10 times miles on hotels through Capital One Travel.
Enjoy your stay in Suite 13.
Whoa, 13? That's Taylor's lucky number. The Venture X card from Capital One. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com for details.